Whether you're organizing a game developer community, whether you're interested in starting one, whether you're just working on your own games, hopefully some of these tips will help you. This is what we do for our project updates in Home Team Game Dev, now based on 9 years of practice in that group, and really 20 of the past years that I've spent starting college clubs before I was doing this kind of stuff professionally now for Home Team. And the updates are pretty simple. There's a 3-part format that I think through. I call it past, present, future, and it models roughly some stuff you might see in Scrum or Agile practices, but it's a little simpler, and the purposes of the audience angle are important to understand to figure out how to make sure you're getting the best out of if you want to implement this in your own practices. So the reason we call it past, present, future is the first thing that we do is we cover what happened in the week behind us. And this is on a thing on a once a week rhythm. Now, granted, a lot of our people in Home Team are doing this stuff just a few hours a week. A lot like, again, if you're students, if you're hobbyists, if you're people moonlighting outside of a main job or something. But once a week, we take stock of just going through the GitHub activity, because keep all of our stuff in a repo, obviously, to share those files, keep version backup history. But we just look back at the descriptions and we kind of give credit and acknowledgement to who did what. Now, this serves a variety of purposes, right? First of all, this helps us keep a beat of who's currently involved. Certainly in the case of Home Team, it's flexible. People aren't always heavily or intensely. It comes and goes, so it's useful to see who's around. Helps people feel acknowledged. The audience for what's been happening the past week is really the team that's already there. It's a mixture of hearing yourself get some credit and acknowledgement for this member of the team did this thing. We want to give them kind of a little micro shout out for that. But then also to keep sort of abreast of other changes, to know who else is tinkering on what, to recognize that, oh, someone else is doing stuff in the particle system, or that boss is being worked on, or there's this bug someone mentioned, someone else knocked it out this week. It helps us to see that that's just developing. Say, for example, maybe you're actually there doing audio, but you hear someone else did a new character sprite for a new kind of enemy. Well, now you might be thinking about that enemy, now that we have the art for it, it's probably going to need sound, and maybe you're holding off on that until we have the art asset in case it got cut. So things like that are important. And again, definitely long. It's very much just functionally doing a quick overview of what happened the week behind us. So that's the past. In terms of the present, that is showing the game running in its current shape. Now, this is something that ideally, if you can show a couple of the new things, that's great to be able to highlight those. Sometimes there's stuff that's under the hood. Sometimes there's things a little more buried. It's not super critical if you can't show every single thing that was in there in showing the game running, because that's not really the purpose. The purpose is twofold. It is, on the one hand, to just keep grounded in what is actually this project that we're working on. Because if all you ever do is you look at what do we do and what's the plan to happen next, you don't keep a thread kind of connecting those on what is the actual project now, there's a chance it slips off the rails and it loses touch with the reality of what has gotten done and what's really there. And this is great because it can help you surface when you're trying to test it. Shoot, you know what? I thought this UI thing already worked, but it doesn't. Or this pickup used to be picked up, and I just noticed when I was trying to demo right here, it doesn't. These are fully expected to be a little bit broken, a little busted, work in progress. That is the process working. Us catching those things helps us recognize the need to add an extra task to fix something, or to spot an opportunity for, like, gosh, you know what? These doors are silent. That's really kind of throwing me off. We're going to need some sound effects for these doors. Doing that at least once a week on a rhythm. Obviously, you're playing a bit when you're working on the game, but then you're kind of focused on testing your own actual fix. This is a chance to kind of play it for a moment. The other thing that's also serves as a function of, and again, it's a different environment every kind of context you're in. So when I was teaching at Northeastern, we had to have locked down teams for people need grades and stuff because it's part of university works. And Home Team and the kind of clubs that I encourage for our practices, the ones I've talked about at GDC a couple times over the years, it's something where we let people drift between teams freely. Again, we don't have to worry about grades and stuff. And so the part of why we're showing the game is to try to excite others, to show them, look what a good time we're having over here. Doesn't this look like a fun thing you can be a part of? Isn't this a project that looks interesting to you? Which is going to be much more compelling seeing it live in action with stuff happening than a schedule, or then which we'll talk about in a second on the future stuff, or the what's got done the week behind on GitHub. Those just aren't as compelling, as grounding as this is a real thing coming together. And so even a little bit, even though it's mostly kind of, again, a bit of our own internal testing, it's a point of it showing the outside people who aren't yet on the team, look what's happening over here, look how interesting this is, you could be part of this as well. There's also just a little bit of kind of encouragement of the team to keep us grounded again and seeing this is coming together. Every week we've got something new to show. And that's even part of our thinking process of what's coming up ahead, is making sure there's at least one or two things happening. So next time I show this game next week, it's not going to be exactly the same as what was behind us. Now, I will say as a caveat on this, when occasionally have this come up, nothing visible got done last week. Maybe other stuff got done. There might have been some commits, there might have been some cleanups, some refactoring, some organization of files, something. It's not that nothing got done. Or it might have been writing in a doc that didn't find its way into the game yet, or concept art that didn't get turned into game assets. It's still worth, at this stage, still showing the game running, because that, knowing that that's coming up and seeing how it looks the same as last time, that actually helps move us a little bit towards avoiding that in the future. And it's not a negative thing. No one's hard on you. No one's mad. No one's upset. Again, in our kind of context, there's no grades or whatever. but it helps us kind of notice, and it makes visual that we haven't moved this vehicle forward, right? That we're where we were a week ago as far as the player could tell. That helps us then prioritize the right kinds of things going forward. And I saw this over many years, way before I was doing home team stuff in the college clubs. The teams that they didn't have anything to show, so they would just skip an update, fell off, gone, never recovered. You gotta still show that update. That's what helps you bounce back and recover. It means you're not giving up. It means you're kind of acknowledging, showing, this, this is the state of the game right now. And then the whole reason for doing that is because that's also a springboard into our final part: past, present, future. Next, we're talking about what's happening the week ahead. And again, this is why it's so important to springboard off here. We just looked at how it currently is. Now let's talk about how it's going to change 1 week from now, over this week ahead of us. That's where we pull up our, used to be on Trello, now we do them on Vicunja. It's a self-hosted alternative. It looks very similar. It's also kind of a Kanban style format. Same thing that I teach in my project management course, CompleteEveryProject.com. If you haven't seen how we do that, that's how we structure our project schedules to finish these 200 plus games on time over the past 9 years. But when we pull up that schedule, we're looking mostly at the week ahead and saying, okay, it looks like there's some character art coming up. There's some fixes for the boss. Maybe because I just ran the game, I recognize let's go and add a task to what got done, or to make sound effects for the door, like I mentioned. Now, the other thing you might see when we first pull up that schedule, depending on who's doing it, often people will actually live update. They still have the column from the week that just happened, and there might still be sort of like, it's not totally caught up. It's not totally in sync. Not everybody's clearing cards as they do them. So they'll take this moment to kind of just live on camera for our groups as part of the updates, or live on projector if they're an in-person group. Okay, this card got dragged to done. We're cutting this card. This card we're going to bump to next week. We don't want cards to pile up next week too bad, so this card we're going to bump ahead 2 or 3 weeks. This can wait till later. Maybe we're going to trade this one for that one ahead. It's going to kind of have a ripple effect to avoid, again, that what I call a snowplow effect. And once the cards all slide forward on top of what was already expected next week. That's not how time works. But clearing that process and vocalizing what we're doing as a project lead actually helps invite others to the process, because it makes it more transparent what's going on. That this did get done, that got cut. Might even articulate a quick reason why, that this is moving ahead, that's why it's causing this other shuffle. That helps people feel much more connected to the project, because they're not just sort of on the receiving end of picking tasks off of a schedule tree, but they're kind of invited into the thinking behind, okay, well, now I recognize that got knocked off, and why, and what we traded it for, and how we see that's coming up. I think we'll often point out that too on that schedule is that even though we have a spread out task over time, a lot of these tasks aren't super order dependent. And this is the things I teach in my course for project planning. It's part of making games on a bigger schedule. People get super caught up too much when they're new on, should this task come before that one? They think there's a right order for all this stuff. For the most part, there are thousands of little tasks, hopefully maybe boiled down to hundreds of cards or dozens of cards, that a bunch of it's just stuff that's get done. It's just a huge pile of stuff to get done. A lot of it isn't order dependent. So in many cases, there might be a few cases where you can't do this until you have that. You can't make levels till your level order done. You can't finalize levels until your jump heights figured out. Can't have enemy tuning until you got your kind of weapons. There's some things to figure out in order, but they're so rare that it's actually easier to kind of spread things around and then trade around until they kind of make a little more sense than it is to kind of get stuck on each and every one where it's a perfect spot. So because of that, the reason I explain all this is that we always remind people we can always fish from the future. Just because we're trying to have these things done by the end of this week, or the best version we have of those, so that's when we're going to stop working on those. They can always, if there's a thing coming up later on the schedule, they'd rather grab that song for the valley, that animation for the skeleton character, that new bow system for the elf or something. They can grab that and take it on. Now, granted, the only exception to this, again, is especially if it's later in the schedule. The later in the schedule something is, the higher chance there is it might get cut, just because things had to get prioritized around what was already working to avoid wasted work. So sometimes, if you right near the end, it becomes a little fishy. It's also we have typically a testing period late in our schedule that kind of leaves a little more wiggle room to try to catch up to make sure that where work got done. Anywho, for the most part, that we do remind them you can borrow from the future of the schedule. Though again, hopefully we're small enough, what I call human scale teams, part of home team split into 3 different communities, so they have a chance to really have a dialogue with their people on the team. Be like, heads up, I'm working on this. Is that cool? Etc. If it helps them navigate that socially, where it's not just thousands of strangers ripping into some random public repos. It is people who are on the same page, have a forum to connect to each other, have the weekly update rhythm I'm just talking about here, past, present, future, every single week. Right, the game pitches. We do this update rhythm every single weekend until the game comes out, and that's part of how we've released every single game on time, 200 plus games out of home team since we founded in October 2015. But hopefully it helps you. Again, if there's some way to adapt that to your process, obviously it may not fit exactly. I know not all of your own environments where you can freely jump between teams. Hopefully you're on a team project, but even if you're not, a lot of the same ideas and thinking might still apply to keep yourself on a good rhythm, and maybe not even as a full video presentation or whatever. But it's just thinking of each week, taking stock of what happened the week behind, what is the current reality of my thing, and what's coming up ahead, right? Say you're working on a book project, and it's part of why I teach, again, CompleteEveryProject.com, which I'm not just trying to sell you. It's because I built this to help people, because it's literally the practices we've used that have been very successful for us that I apply to my business stuff. I use the same practices, not just for games, but also in developing my audiobooks, my video courses, etc. It helps us so much to take stock of what I do in the week behind, what quantifiably has been done, to look at it in its current shape. Is there actually new pages? Are there actually new videos? Is more video edited or wherever I'm in the process? And then what's happening the week ahead, to be strategic about, okay, based on where I'm at, where am I going next? Shredding that calendar behind us, just like I show in that video course. So we're always focusing on where am I at, where am I going next, and the next week taking stock of what actually happened, which may not be one-to-one. That's not the end of the world, right? It's not, you don't fail based on a mismatch of those two. You're just trying to continuously course correct, try to make sure you're steering towards a destination you're happy with, which may be different from what you initially thought you were setting out to do. That's another topic for another day. Anyway, hope it's helpful to somebody out there. Look forward to playing the games you're going to make, or the products and things you're going to develop out there with it. Hopefully, again, practice can be applied if you're running a club, if you're trying to start one, working on games, other software and stuff. Anyway, good to see you all again. Hope you have a good day, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.